So we are talking to Tia Levings. Hi, Tia.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Life is bright.
Yes. And we were saying it's been a day already today, so we'll talk
It
about that,
has.
right?
It has. It's been a shiny day
It's been a
because
shiny
the
day.
the documentary is called "Shiny Happy People,"
There you go.
of which I was one, and so it has been a shiny day.
Yeah, I like that's a song, right? Shiny
It is
Happy.
a song.
Yeah,
It's a great song from the '80s.
it is. Yeah, I remember that
Mm.
song. Had to mute myself. This is why they have cough buttons in radio,
I love
because yeah,
that.
it's just so everyone listening knows that Scott and I are both getting over being sick, and you might hear it in our voices. We're going to try not to cough as we're talking to Tia. We are interviewing her virtually, so there's no danger of passing on anything. Um,
Correct.
so I was looking through your Instagram,
Hmm.
and which is great, by the way. You have a really great
Thank you.
Instagram. If you're not following, is it at Tia Levings? Is that what it is?
Tia Levings writer.
Tia Levings writer. So if you're not
Hmm.
following her, just do it right now while you're listening to this, and it's really impressive. But you went to Paris,
I did
yeah,
recently.
and I want to know your either your top three favorite meals or your
Mm.
favorite place to go and what you ate there.
Okay, so there's this an ironic thing. I'm a foodie, and when I went to Europe on my great I fuck it quit trip, I was like, "Fuck you! I'm out of here. I'm peacing out. I'm taking this." There's a whole story into why I was in Paris. Um, the thing I loved the most about Paris, the food was sweet and precious and wonderful and all the things that we expect it to be, but it did not overwhelm me as much as the peace and freedom and autonomy of taking myself to Paris and realizing that I was there with the person, I was there with my best girl, and it was me. I'm the one that, it's a love story. The Paris trip was a love story in a stream of travel, and I have done so much healing on my self-worth that I was overjoyed to be in the city of
Wow.
love with someone I love. So I did have very good bread. I did have very good desserts and coffee, and they have all these shops full of meringues and delicious, beautiful things that are photographable before you eat them. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I took endless long walks. I loved all of it, but the food, I always thought the food was be the thing that I loved the most, and it was just part of the texture, actually.
Yeah. It sounds like it was like tasting freedom,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
very sweet in and of itself.
It really was.
Yeah.
It really was.
And
I
that,
enjoy my
yeah.
own company, and I was free to do that without criticism or censor or caretaking. I come from a big people-pleasing, caretaking, fawning culture, and to be there and to only have to worry about my own needs and desires and wants was revolutionary. Viva
Yeah.
la France!
Wow. It sounds like, and I've not done this, but it
Mhm.
sounds like everybody should have a trip like that.
I highly recommend it. I took this trip as a protection to my nervous system. It's a slow travel trip. I took an ocean crossing on a ship to
Mm.
get overseas, and then I took trains across England and trains across France and trains into Italy.
Wow.
And I'd had buffer days in between each destination, so when I would arrive at a place, my one job was to arrive and get settled, and then the next day I could do what I wanted to do, and then, travel days. It was just very buffered, the whole entire experience. And it was a gift to my nervous system and a big part of my trauma healing, which I didn't really realize, but it yes, I highly recommend everyone if you can slow travel.
I love the idea of an arrival day where all you do is arrive. I
Yeah,
don't know that I've
yeah.
ever done that.
Well, we say the cliche, joy is in the journey,
Mm-hmm.
and then our culture is all about getting there as quickly as you can.
Right.
So we truncate the journey, and if that was the joyful part, then why do we do that? So I like to see what I'm, flying over. I don't really like to fly, but if I'm going to travel over a place, I want to see what it is.
Yeah.
And slower travel allowed me to do that, but most importantly, it allowed my nervous system time to acclimate. And when I was going into new cultures, new sensory experiences, my system needed that acclimation time. And so taking time to arrive and be present
Yeah.
is actually really essential. And it isn't built into a lot of trips because people's time is limited.
Well, and for me, with like the capitalistic mindset of I need to get the most out of every day, And Scott might, if he's able to talk later, he might talk about the different ways we've approached vacations, where I have booked every single minute.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm down with Tia. I like this idea of, like, I think when I got to Europe, the first thing I noticed is how urgent of a culture I had arrived from.
Yes.
To a culture that was like, relax, you're going to be here for a minute, and we'd like you to enjoy yourself.
Yeah. It was shaking. It was very jarring. And then I had to settle in. It took me, when I got to Italy, and I was spending the most amount of time in Italy, I slept for 36 hours. My nervous system just completely like downloaded. Then when I came back to America, I wasn't on American soil for 15 minutes when I felt like the collective chaos in the air.
Yeah.
My whole system jarred to, oh my goodness, we live like this all the time.
Yeah.
And we don't even feel it because we're just acclimated to it. But it's, I mean, I did spend 3 hours in customs in the middle of the night. That did happen, but it was not a gracious reentry.
No. No one wants to do that. Well, wow, thank you for that. I love that thoughtful answer, and I feel like I went on a little bit of that trip with you now, so thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And I'm going to take that with me, that arrival day thing. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins. This is the only one in the room, but I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co-host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, Hun. So we are talking to Tia Levings. She's an author and an activist who shines light on the abuses in Christian fundamentalism. She's on a mission to help you understand the ways our culture is being shaped by high-controlled religion, to support survivors of religious trauma, and to raise awareness, accountability, and informed voting through our stories. Tia appears in the Amazon docuseries Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets, and her memoir, A Well-Trained Wife, releases in 2024 with St. Martin's Press. And this isn't in your bio, but you have a podcast that isn't in here. Yeah, that you interviewed me for. And we've actually connected outside of the podcast. And I think it was Lisa Ellison that connected us first. Is that right?
Yes.
I love Lisa.
We do love Lisa,
Yes.
and Lisa loves us, and she sang your praises long before I got a chance to meet you.
Yeah.
And it was just beautiful. You've lived up to all the expectations, but she is a matchmaker.
She is a great connector, so shout out to her. And so, first of all, I want to congratulate you on your memoir, because that's a really big deal.
Thank you.
It's coming out next year. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know
August,
when?
August 2024. Yeah.
Excellent. August 2024. And we're going to talk about what you cover. As we were getting on today, you mentioned that the trailer for the docuseries Shiny Happy People had dropped today.
It did.
So can you just tell me a little bit about that, what it is, the trailer, and how that felt?
So it's a big part of the loop that I'm in of this big life change, this big massive life change. A quick recap would be that Joshua Duggar is the oldest Duggar son, and he had a very large legal scandal that came to a head in his trial in 2019. Was it 2019, 2021? I'm getting my years mixed up, but I started on the cusp of that because of that activation. I started making social media content in relation to the Duggar family lifestyle because I'm from the same cult, and their show portrayed fundamentalism as this beautiful, shiny, happy lifestyle that we should all aspire to, when in fact it was sheltering church-sanctioned domestic abuse, isolation, really what should be criminal behavior, and it breeds a culture that fosters and shelters abuse. So I started making reels about the reality of that lifestyle because I left it in 2007. I actually escaped it in a very dramatic midnight escape with my children. And those reels took off like wildfire, and my social media platform took off like wildfire. And then as a result, I was invited to participate in this documentary, and that was in February of 2022. Yeah, 2022. So the trailer, we've been building up to this because they've been editing and, interviewing a lot of other people and putting it together. And so we haven't had a release date. We haven't known, the big details of the release until now. And so this morning is the day that the trailer dropped. I didn't know that my clip would be included. I am a I think, a big portion of the documentary itself. It's 4 episodes long, and I have a lot of commentary in 3 of those episodes. And my story is part of episode 2. So while it is centered on the Duggars, they did that because the Duggars are a recognizable family to most of America. So their lifestyle will be familiar and, kind of a gateway into it. But the story, the documentary itself, is actually about the cult that we were a part of, and Bill Gothard, who ran that cult, and his influence on Christian nationalism in America today. So it's the Duggars are just the welcome mat into what was really going on behind the scenes, and it very well parallels what my story is.
Wow. So the Duggars I only know from the occasional cover of People magazine. And I remember there are lots of kids.
Yes.
And
it's called the quiverful mindset.
A quiverful mind. What does
quiverful.
that mean?
Quiverful, it comes from a verse in the Bible that says, children are like arrows unto the Lord, and happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. And so you're likening children to arrows, and why don't you want as many arrows as possible when you're going into battle? Of course you do. So you want as many children as you could possibly have because they're in a battle for the West.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's... So I just want to, just tell you where I'm coming from as we go into this conversation. So growing up, I had 0 exposure to religion of any kind. The first time I was in a house of worship, I was 17 or 18, and it was for a wedding. My stepfather's father was an Episcopalian minister, but I didn't really know him, and it wasn't brought into our home. So when I got married, my ex-husband is Jewish, and I thought... I've always, watched religion on TV and in movies and read about it. And so I wanted to learn as much as I could about Judaism. And since it's half my children's heritage, I wanted them to be exposed to it. So I took the initiative, and we did Shabbat on Friday nights. And, we did the high holidays, but I still never went to temple. I didn't convert. I wasn't part of it. But I like the traditions and the stories. I'm a storyteller. There's so many good stories there. So you're a former Christian fundamentalist. I find that fascinating. I'm not even really sure what that means. And it's actually not what I wanted to talk to you about today specifically. Right. But I think it's really important for when we get to why I wanted to talk to you today, for you to kind of lay the groundwork for what that means and what I know you belong to a series of churches. It wasn't just one church throughout your childhood and adulthood.
Yes.
But from what I gathered from listening to you, I think there's a common thread in all of them. So, yes, tell us what that means, what it meant to you, and what it was like for you.
So the layers are so important because the point where I am the only person in the room who chooses an identity over my marriage is all layered in that backstory. I grew up originally in an evangelical megachurch, very large church in the Southeast. Our pastor was the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, very political, very powerful, and very mainstream America. Like, the things that I experienced at that church were often happy. They're very relatable to most people. We were steeped in evangelical culture and media and all the things, and I was slowly we are assimilated. We are slowly taught that we have roles. We have very specific roles according to gender, and we are expected to step into them and accept who God sends to marry us. And we will know that we are supposed to marry that person because they will say, "I am the person that you are supposed to get married to.
Wow.
I am God. I am who God sent." And so there's no talk of chemistry or compatibility or anything like that. If you are a girl, you are going to be a wife and a mother. If you go to college, it will be to become an MRS degree, a wife, before you graduate, or as a teacher so that you can teach your children, or work in an acceptable career. So there's not any options.
Did you say MRS degree?
Yes, that's what we call it, the MRS degree. You're looking for Mister, so you're just in college because there's a bigger pool of God's bests.
I've never heard that. That's terrible.
A Southern Christian joke. If you're lucky enough to go to college, that's what you're there for.
Right.
You're not really expected to graduate.
Exactly. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, no. So I married at 19 the guy who said that he wanted to marry me. And he turned out to be an abusive person, but I did not have language or vocabulary to identify that. My whole mindset was, we have God. God can help us fix anything. These are normal struggles. These are normal fights, yada, yada. He was also a theology buff, so he was always looking for the right answer to solve for God, and that was leading him on a theological journey that was taking us into an ever-narrowing religion at the same time that the evangelical church itself was becoming more narrow and more political. So my story, while it happened in my household, was also reflected on the larger church culture that we were part of. And this is very important because my big lesson from all of this is that the church, the Christian patriarchy, wants to run our country the way that they run their homes. And that's why, looking at stories like the Duggars or my own story as well, we have to look at what was happening behind closed doors and what it's like to live in those homes. That's how we make sense of what's happening, these radical changes in our country. They have been in this agenda for a very long time. So fundamentalism in general, I define as any time you put ideological purity first and foremost over anything else. It's an idea over people. You are always serving the ideology and the purity, and fundamentalism really can be in anything. People get fundamentalist about their exercise habits and their nutrition and anything that just the purity, it matters.
Right.
When it mixes with religion, it's particularly toxic. Your stakes don't get any higher than your eternity and burning in a lake of fire forever, and divorce is worse than death. There's no out from a situation like that. And it doesn't matter who you are. You have no identity. Your identity is in Christ, and Christ suffered. So your suffering is then validated. The more you suffer, the holier you are, and you shouldn't want to have any kind of identity. So now at this point in my life, I was having, I had 5 children, and I had them in 10 years. I had 9 pregnancies. That was pretty normal and that some of them were conceived on birth control. So I was trying not to have as many children. And I say that with a very careful catch in my heart, because I wanted all of my children. I really wanted what they wanted for me, which was very convenient. I was complicit in my own narrowing because I wanted to be a wife and a mother, and please God and please people and be, sweet homemaker, and I wanted all of those things for myself. I just didn't want all the pain and suffering that was coming with it, and the lack of air in the room. And eventually I hit a crisis point where I had no identity in God. I wasn't seen by my Creator, and I was struggling with suicidal ideation because it was my only way out. And so, in a physical sense, my first story, A Well-Trained Wife, is leaving my marriage to save my life. It is choosing my identity. It's choosing my life over anything else that they're offering me, because I did get to a point where I said, well, if this is religion, if this is God, and this is faith, I don't want it, because I actually want to live, and I want my children to live. And there's only one way that's going to happen, is if I leave it.
How old were you then?
I was 33.
You were 33. So you've been married since you were 19.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd had 5 children in that marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You said 9 pregnancies, but 5 children.
Yeah. And I had 4 surviving because my daughter died in 99.
I'm so sorry.
She changed my life. Her name is Clara. She offered clarity, and she's the reason I'm alive today.
Could you talk about that a little bit, or is that something that you talk about? Yeah.
I am happy to talk about Clara. She was my 3rd viable pregnancy. She had hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which we did not have diagnosed until she was born. I was in the hospital at that point because I'd gone into preterm labor at 32 weeks. But before that, I had been in this very, it's the peak of my mentorship into the cult. And we were not supposed to really go to doctors or use prenatal care and sonography and all of that. So I had been on a track to not have any intervention in that pregnancy. And then I went into early labor, and I rebelled. It was my first rebellion of saying, no, I'm going to the hospital. I don't care what anybody says to me. I'm going to the hospital. This is too early for the baby to be born. And in that emergency room visit is when they discovered something was wrong, and that put us on a medical trajectory. She was born term, pink, healthy, beautiful, except broken inside. She had half a heart, and when you are in utero, you're not using your lungs, so using one side of your heart is fine because it's not oxygenating any blood through your lungs. And then after you're born, if you don't have that ductus and you don't have the other half of your heart, you cardiac arrest. And it looks like SIDS for a lot of families, that it happens anywhere between 1 and 3 days. So some families go home from the hospital and then their baby dies. Like the baby does not look sick when that's this defect.
Right.
So she had, we flew to Atlanta. I knew about, they had a CICU in Atlanta. We're in Jacksonville, so our hospital didn't do those heart repairs. And she had surgery at a week old and lived in the CICU. I lived in Ronald McDonald House. It was the first time I had really been on my own. It was a very tumultuous time. The night before we were supposed to leave the hospital, she choked and aspirated and died. And that also, wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't her heart repair that killed her. It was a strange choking accident. And she split me open. I was in a culture where we weren't really supposed to grieve. We were supposed to give God the glory and be grateful and happy that she's no longer hurting. You bypass all of spiritual bypassing against all your pain and grief. You're supposed to release and compress and all of these things, and I couldn't. She'd split me completely open. There was no option to contain it, and I could not go back to who I had been before her. It was not possible to put the pieces of myself back into the same shell, and so that began a mental and emotional deconstruction of what I believed and what I was participating in. It still took me 7 years to get my physical body out, but my attitude and mindset had changed as a result of that in 99. So it's an honor to speak to her, speak for her, represent her. I really wouldn't be here without that experience, and I'm grateful that I got to know her.
Thank you so much for telling me that story. And Scott and I have a friend who has 3 children that are living and one who died at 4 months, and it was a subject I instinctively was going to avoid always. And she not only gave us permission to discuss it, but encouraged us to, because it's her daughter as well, just as much as the ones that we're aware of, that we know. And it's important. And so I just appreciate you giving people that encouragement to not flinch away unless someone's asked for that. Every single time I share Clara, I create space for someone to share their own story, and they always do. Yeah. They always do. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, so you left your marriage. I did. I escaped. Did you have help? Did you have counsel with people who were saying, I'm picturing like an underground railroad happening. I wish. Yeah. I wish. There was a priest who I had spoken to earlier in the day, that very day, that I knew I needed to get out. I knew we were going to be the next murder-suicide on the face of People magazine. I knew that if I did not leave. Wow. And later that night, I just narrowly escaped with the kids. It's a big, harrowing story, and little bit supernatural feeling sometimes. But I did get out, and the priest helped us, sheltered us overnight, and helped us the next day leave the state. So you felt this mounting sense of danger in your home, and you took all 5 kids? 4 kids, sorry, yes. Yeah, the gist, it was Halloween night, 2007, and my children had never trick-or-treated, and they were so looking forward to it. My husband's mental health had deteriorated beyond safety. There had been many, many, many horrifying warning signs, and the previous weekend he had reported me missing to my family, and I knew that was an enormous red flag for serious danger. And I also knew that when there was some animal
deaths, I knew that that was a big red flag for you are really in danger.
Yeah.
You have to go. And I had this really naive idea that my children needed to trick or treat because they would not remember everything that happened around their family's thing, but they would, like, that's important to a child, like they're going to remember. And I had a kind of, I know now it was a delusion, but at the time I wanted to keep things as normal and innocent for them as possible, and I didn't know that the danger was that urgent.
Right.
So we went trick-or-treating, and it was weird, but it was fine. We were with friends, and we got home, and he snapped, and he held me hostage for 4 hours, threatening to kill me with a length of firewood. And randomly, after the 4th hour, he left. He said, "I'm out of here." And he had never left a fight before. That had never happened. And I was in shock when he did it. I couldn't believe that he was going to leave the house. And I heard a voice in my head say, "Run." And I grabbed laundry that I'd folded that day, my laptop, and my children, and we ran. And he had gone back to the office to get his gun.
Wow. Wow, Tia. You just gave me chills.
Yeah.
I mean, what I was going to ask you to talk about later on, which I called bold and brave, like that is, and I hear you when you say that you heard this voice that said, "Run." I don't know what I believe, but I believe in stuff like that. I don't typically believe in coincidence. I have all these things
Same.
that have happened in my life that I call it like divine energy, something. I don't know what I picture. I picture sparkles, but I've heard a voice like that. You and I talked when you were interviewing me about Stash, and the same voice that said to me, "Enough," when I was at the end of my addiction and my children were on the line. That didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like something coming in to give me that sense of urgency.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. There's the Bible calls it, we're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. If we look at nature, everything composts, but our energy has to go somewhere. We're surrounded with starlight and sunlight.
Starlight, yes.
I just think there is something there, and I also don't believe in coincidences. Fractals in nature speak to me, and us all having a piece of the divine together and coming together as a collective speaks to me. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but
Yeah,
I know that voice. I hear her,
Yeah.
or it, or they, or they saved me.
The thing that, just going back a little bit, the thing that you were warning us about, why it's so important to look at what was going on inside the church and inside these homes, sounds very Handmaid's Tale to me.
Yeah.
Is
I
that
often
the right picture?
It is. I often call my story the prequel to The Handmaid's
The prequel
Tale.
to The Handmaid's Tale. Okay.
And it's important to remember that Atwood used real Christian fundamentalist groups as her model.
I didn't know that, but I could have probably guessed that just from...
Yeah.
And what's so interesting is I don't remember what year that came out, but...
Late 80s, I think.
The series, not the
the series?
Books.
Oh, yeah.
But just watching it seems so preposterous. Like it was this dystopian fantasy that couldn't ever happen. And then to see where we are, kind of, and I see what you're talking about a little. I'm probably not anywhere near aware of it as you are, because my eyes haven't been opened like that.
The key elements are all there. And if we take out the one thing that is part of the story of The Handmaid's Tale, is that you have a handmaid her purpose is to breed babies. And that is present in fundamentalism as well. Your purpose is to breed babies. You may not be raped by a commander,
Right.
but you might be raped by your husband. I'm very much a survivor of marital rape for 15 years. And my purpose was to breed. The strict silencing of the women, the role reversals, like the role that you're engaged in, all of that during lockdown, being hyper modesty. Every feature of the story exists in Christian fundamentalism.
Yeah. Wow. there used to be these bumper stickers back in the, I don't know, the 80s or 90s that said, if you're not mad, you're not paying attention.
Exactly.
And I know that there are things that I purposefully haven't paid attention to in a while. My plate was full with other stuff for a while.
Sure.
But I really appreciate you. One, I can't wait to read your book.
Thank
I can't
you.
wait to read it. I will be looking at the Duggar family secrets, the shiny happy people, with different eyes, right? Having had this conversation with you. So now I want to kind of move into, so this is when you and I were talking, and we were at the end of the interview, and we were just chatting, and I told you about this article that I read. It was published in December of 2022, and the headline is, "My boyfriend, a writer, broke up with me because I'm a writer," and it was published in The Guardian. And this, I'm going to read just one paragraph from it. It says, "My friends lived in Brooklyn, but he wanted to live on the Upper West Side. We moved to the Upper West Side. My book was published. For 10 days, he seemed glad to support me. It felt great. And then the dynamic changed. He told me I was taking his supportiveness for granted. He said that he considered it his responsibility to take me down a peg. I considered parceling out the good news I shared. I tried to need less." And so there's a lot, it's a big article, but there's a lot of stuff in there. So she's like making herself small, right? She doesn't want to share the joy of her successes with him because he's responding to it in this particular way. And so I'm telling you about this article because I was just shocked by the headline. And what you said shocked me even more than that headline. Do you remember what you said?
Not exactly.
You said, well, my husband divorced me because I'm a writer. Yes. And you said that he asked you to choose between the marriage or writing, and you chose writing. That was the shocker.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read this to you really quick. Careers with the highest divorce rates. Top 10. Bartenders are number 1. Exotic dancers, military supervisors, medical and healthcare workers, gaming service workers, flight attendants, telemarketers, dancers, choreographers, marriage therapists, and textile knitting and weaving machine operators.
What? Okay.
Which they said, because they gave an explanation for each one, and they said it might just be the, because it's skilled labor and it's long, hard hours, maybe they're just too tired to engage with their partner afterward. Obviously, writer is not on this list.
No.
So can you tell us?
Successful writer is definitely not on that list.
Right. Tell me this experience that shocked me when you told me. Tell me about what happened.
So my second husband was a love story. He was a healing story. He was, in so many ways, the provider of health and stability and a platform, a foundation to where I could have a soft place to land and also put my life back together. He helped me raise my children. He helped me keep my children. It was, I thought, very compatible, high chemistry marriage. And as my children grew and as I worked through trauma therapy, I was working on this story. And I've always been a writer. I was working as a writer when he met me. It was in corporate land, so it wasn't emotional. There wasn't anything personal about it. But he loved my writing. And I loved that he loved my writing. It was something I held dear, to be valued for something that I bring to it, that isn't just my role or body or, the vagina and my breasts and my hands. And, it was an intellectual skill that I could offer and contribute. And we were together, it will have been 15 years. And I just, at the beginning of the episode, shared the story of how my platform exploded and how I got the opportunity to participate with the documentary. And I started noticing that he was withdrawing, kind of commensurate at the time I was digging down. I was working very long hours because I was under deadline, and I had a real chance to sell my book. I am a debut author with no real history. I don't have a college education. To be given this opportunity was a massive blessing. And I went whole hog on it. My kids were older. We had gotten to a really good place with this. And so I kept telling my family, it's an Olympic sport. I know I'm not around very often, but it's an Olympic sport with a deadline. And when I get there, we will be able to enjoy the spoils of the war, and we will we will relax and we'll have fun together. And I assumed he was there with me. And I was incorrect in that assumption. When I signed with my agent, he stayed in the other room. When I sold the book successfully, a 6-figure deal, big 5 publisher, he did not buy champagne. He did not celebrate. And later, it was in the middle of a crisis with my son in the ER. He told a third party that he needed a divorce. And in that moment, I was 4 hours in the middle of the night in a high crisis with my son, and not supported, not heard, and I was actually having the rug ripped out from under my feet. And I told him I wasn't willing to do that unless he did his work. And he said he wouldn't do his work if I kept writing, that he was neglected and he needed more attention. And it was not a choice, really. Writing keeps me alive. It keeps me going. It's how I know what I'm going to think. It's too much of my essence to I was like, okay, you may be dismissed, because I will not, like that author said in the piece, I will not try to need less. I need this.
Yeah. Were you shocked, not just by what he said, but by your response?
Yes, because I had not ever, other than the night of my escape in my first marriage, choosing myself has never happened. Even in recovery, I managed to recover by people pleasing, endlessly serving my children, always putting them first. You know, as you can imagine, raising 4 kids is very demanding. All of the trauma healing I had to go through was very, very intense. But choosing Tia and choosing what I wanted and not knowing what was on the other side of that choice is the bravest thing I've ever done. And I knew that nobody from my background would understand or choose that themselves, because we have generations of women in high control religion who submit and they suppress their dreams and their aspirations, and they're lauded for it. They're the ones celebrated on Mother's Day for being sacrificing. And so I knew that this was an audacious thing that I was choosing, and I did it anyway.
Wow. When you left your first marriage, that escape in the middle of the night with your children, you said you, besides the priest who you'd spoken with that very day, you didn't have support. Did you this time? Did you have any kind of community or friends or?
I did. I'm so grateful for them. I'm so grateful. I will say too, in the first divorce, that once I told my parents what was going on, they did catch me, and they were part of my village. And I did have online work. Like, there is some safety net that happened that I used kind of as a model. I never let go of my friendships the second time, and I never let go of things that would be like viable income earners for me.
Yeah.
And so I did have a support network. I have excellent friends, and I have really sharp writer friends who understood this choice, like from a bone marrow place. Like, a real writer understands that you will not give up your words because a man says you have to give up your words.
Well, not if that's who you are.
No, exactly.
Right? And
exactly.
And I think in our conversation you mentioned to me that he seemed to feel that this was temporary. That
he did.
That you were doing this to get something and then it would be over. Do you know?
He thought,
yeah, tell me.
He thought that I wasn't really serious about it, that I think my success was not practical to him. He did not think it would really happen. He didn't pay attention when I told him exactly how I was reverse engineering my plan and how I was trying to do all the things that you need to do to land in that very reasonable destination. Yeah. He didn't engage in any of that, and he didn't believe in me. And when I realized he didn't believe I could do it, that spoke more than almost anything else that he had said. It's like, if you don't think I can do it, then why would I be intimate and close to someone who doesn't believe that I can do the thing that I set my mind to doing, and that I'm devoted so much of my life to making happen? and to understand the importance of the story. I can talk to an average person on the street, tell them my story, and they can understand why it's important that I tell it. But my intimate partner could not understand why I needed to tell that story. There's the door.
Yeah. Wow. We're coming close to the end, but I'm curious. Do you think if your book existed when you were 25, 26, kind of in the middle of this, and you had been able to read it, do you think it would have made a difference to you then?
I know it would. I'm going to cry. I get messages every day from people who my social media work is impacting them. I get messages that say, I'm leaving my husband of 23 years. You have finally put language to what I experienced in my family. Me putting language to their experience is a very common theme, and naming the harm done is a very common theme. And I know because the internet saved my life, which is we could have a whole nother conversation about that, but it was connection online that helped me break free and get out. I know I would have been on social media looking at different accounts for explanations of my pain, and I know it would have helped me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I set out to help one woman. If one woman read it, then that happened a long time ago. That happened a couple years ago. I was like, oh, okay. Interesting to see.
Maybe next time you come on, we'll do that in coordination with your release. We could talk about the only one who says the internet saved her life. Because
am I forming a pattern here of hooking you at the end?
Yes, you are. We can't have any more conversations after this,
right?
Because it'll just be like a series of Laura Tia interviews.
I love.
But I would like to. I mean, as an author, you were kind enough to have me on your show. In coordination with my release. I like to extend that to other authors whenever I can, because I know podcasts make a difference.
They really do.
I'm seeing the fruit of that labor right now. And,
so good.
Because podcast listeners, y'all who are listening, y'all are readers. You share podcast episodes that you fall in love with or that you think your friends might, connect with. And you also share books. And in the same way, this is kind of unique. People who solely get everything from the internet, younger people, I'm guessing probably, who aren't reading an actual book, but are just scrolling, and that's kind of where they get their information. They're not as likely to share a 50-minute podcast episode or an entire book, but podcast listeners are. So
yes.
We will definitely have you back on. I am endlessly fascinated with your journey, and we'll look forward to reading the book. Scotty and I will watch the documentary. You said it comes out in June?
June 1st.
June 1st. So I don't know, as you're listening, it might already be out. You'll just have to see. But if it's already out, definitely go check it out. And if it's not out yet, check it on June 1st. What's it come out on? How is it available?
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. Oh, that's right. It was in the bio. Okay. Yeah. Tell me where people can find you and follow your amazing Instagramness.
Yes. My website is tialevings.com, and I'm Tia Levings Writer on all the social platforms.
Yes. You're on TikTok as well?
I am.
Of course.
I engage the most on Instagram, though. If you want to interact with me and send me messages, Instagram.
Instagram's the way to go.
The place to be.
Me too.
I love Instagram.
Yeah. I don't have nearly as many followers as you do, but it's still where I live.
It's where the heart is. People really engage there.
Yeah. Well, this has been, I expected it to be this good, so I won't say that I didn't expect it, but I loved our conversation. Thank you so much, Tia.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Tia.
Hi, I'm Tia Levings, and I'm the only one who chose my identity over my marriage.